So you've got a favorite game such as Series Sam 4. You've beaten the game, you have nothing else to do. Well, I'm here to help you so you can do something within your favorite game. If I click here, you can see I have some experience, let's just say that. So I am here to teach you. So first off, we need to find the editor. Where is it located? Well, by default, it might be like this for you. You won't see it anywhere. So how do you find it? You click on games, choose tools. I'm just gonna enable this because I need it. And then you type editor. And it should pop up here. And you install it and then you launch it. It's simple as that. Give it some time. Now actually I have two instances of the editor. Right, so now knowing the basics of navigation. By default, you won't have anything here what I have. You only have these. So you want to make a map. So it's obvious you're gonna need a world. And another option is in File, New, World. So I'm just gonna double click on this. This is how you open up a world. Right. So by default, you won't have anything. Now, how do you create nothing into something? It's pretty simple. Because Crow Team already did that for you. And what do I mean by that? Well, first off, we go to World Editor, Terrain Editor. Now by default, these are the options you have. Hide map file, not important. Diffuse, not important. Biome, up to you. What do I mean by that? If you click here, you get to choose which biome you need. And if it's not there for you, like for example, it opens up this. So what you do, you go to Series Sam 4, databases, biomes, and there you go. But for this tutorial, I'm gonna choose Western Europe. My favorite is Cathedral and Western Europe, but you can choose whatever you want. So for this tutorial, I'm just gonna choose this. And how do you adjust the size? Well, you simply click on this and drag it. However, if you have a weak computer, I wouldn't recommend going here like I do. I have pretty strong computer, so I can go nuts. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna leave the 2. Now nothing else is important between biome and terrain size. So if we hit OK, it asks you to save the world. Because why is that? Because you see, terrain needs the saved data to know where to put the terrain files. So we need to create our own world. And by default, you might get this, so you just click on that, go to content. This is important because if you save your world into a wrong folder, the game won't pick up your map, and we don't need that. We don't want that. We want it to pick the right map that you created. So you go to Series Sam 4, Levels. If you click here, Create New Directory, click on it. This is important. If you're making a survival map, put this. If you're making a campaign, put this. And how do you know that this is correct? Well, Planet Badass over here, the old title for Series Sam 4, if I click on it, this is where they store all the maps. So this is what we're gonna do as well. So we go back, go here. Now I'm just gonna put tutorial, O1 tutorial. This is important, put O1 so the game knows which level it is, such as level 1 tutorial. See what I mean? Now save. Let's check. So terrain bin is saved in my campaign terrains 01 tutorial. My campaign terrains 01 tutorial terrain geometry. Alright, so it's saved everything fine. Now, if we press, you see the terrain over here, but how do we move? Well, if you press escape, your mouse disappears, but if you move your mouse, you can look around. See what kind of magic this is? Alright, so click here. This is important. You can't do anything just with the terrain because you're in the terrain editor. So if we go to world editor, we can now go around. Now, if you press escape, WASD, you gamers pretty much know this combination. And move around with mouse. Mouse wheel will change the speed of the camera. And for example, if you go nuts like that and you can't find your map anywhere, well, there's a special combination, Control F. And if we put terrain, it will select the terrain. Now, I'm just gonna check. Yep. Okay, so if you press A now, make sure you're not in the camera mode. If you press A, it will put you back to the terrain. Now if you press escape and reduce the speed so you don't go nuts again with the camera, you can slowly with the mouse wheel go back. To deselect the terrain now, because we have it selected, we need to edit something else, you press the console key. Well, if you played Half-Life, you know which one the key is to activate the console. But in this engine, it deselects like that. And how do I know if I deselected it? Well, if you put it back in, see? If you pay attention here, this is what you have selected. And it says unnamed. Well, that's not important. If you wanna, you can give a name here. Let's just say terrain. Like that. And if we do this again, see? It's selected terrain. Over here, we have the terrain. Alright, so to deselect it, this is the center of the terrain. The map's pretty much done. This is a simple map for the sake of the tutorial. I just want you to know how you can learn the combinations in order to create your own map. Alright. Okay, so the next combination is the numpad keys. If you press 9, 6 is the shaded, 9 is the edit mode, what I like to call, and you'll only need 6, 9, and 7. 7 is when you work with dark areas, 9 is when you work with the entities, 6 is when you work with the shaders. That's pretty much it. Alright, so we want a sun, shaders, and lightning. So we'll know what we're dealing with. First off, I'm gonna create a sky because the light needs to reflect from the sky to properly give corrected shaders. And I'll talk about corrected shaders in a moment, but for now we need to create a sky. Now, how do we do that? First off, entity list. This is what you need. If you pay attention here, you get tools, favorite selections, not really important, and entity list. Scene lights, I'm not really familiar with this, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're only gonna focus on entity lists. So if we click on it, we get a bunch of folders. Now, how do I start with something? Well, the sky is located in geometry, and geometry is mostly all the visual stuff. Well, not really much of the visuals, but like decals. Crumbs is basically grass, but it's an old entity, we won't be using that. Simple model, static model, and so on. First off, the sky is called cube background. Why is it called cube background? If we click on it and hold the mouse and then drag it onto our scene, it's gonna create this. And this is a cube. And now as you see, if I press 6, the sky didn't change. Well, because there's nothing in the cube background. And how do we add something? Well, if you go to entity, and this is our cube, and if you don't have it selected, you click on it and this will appear. So what the only thing we want to focus on is texture, but to know if it does anything, we can click on this, and as you see, As the sky changes, the lighting changes as well. Now I'm gonna just put it to default around that. Texture. Click on it, choose browse. By default, you might get this. So this root directory is to return to the disk of your folders, and to locate the sky you need, you go to content, and then you won't need to do anything else because the engine does it for you. What do you mean by that? Well, if you go here where it says filter and start typing something, the skies are mainly called backgrounds. How do I know that? Well, you can go to Serious Sam 4 textures and look for what you need, but you may not find it. So the easiest method is to know. I'm gonna provide you a note file on what kind of filters you can search for, so you can easily locate what you need. Right in the filter here, we type in background, and while it's doing its search, we wait. Alright, so it's pretty much enough. Those at the end don't matter unless you are making your own sky, but for the sake of tutorial we won't be doing that. We will be picking an existing sky. Now, how do I know how they look like? If you hold F3, it will show you. Alright, so this one looks alright. Now if you press escape again, it will load in. Now the problem is, the player will be able to see this cube. Now how do we make it disappear? Simple. Click on it, hold Control, and this will appear. Now I'm just gonna go into entity mode, what I like to call it, and press numpad 9. Now hold Control, and then click on it, on this upper arrow, the green one, and put it down. We need to go through this, the terrain, and we needed to put as much down so the player does not see it. There we go. Now, numpad 6, we get to see our sky. Now the problem is, if you look down, the terrain becomes black. Why is that? Because there's a post-processing effect that's missing. So, how do we fix that? To fix this annoying light change, sudden light changes, we need a post-processing effect. It's an effect that I'd like to say that balances your lighting and makes it smoother, more dark, or more bright. Now go to Entity List again. We can collapse that. Effects plus sign, post-processing effect. Click on it, drag and drop here. Now if we go to our entity mode by pressing numpad 9, press A to focus on it, go to entity, post-processing preset. These are the all values you can mess with. Infinite range means that it's covering the whole world. If you don't want it to cover the whole world, you can click on here, but now you'll have to mess with these settings. And what does these do? Now, if you click on selection here and choose selection ranges, you'll see the box, a gray box. What does that mean is where the effect will take place. Now if I move this a bit, and you'll see this way you can add different post-processing effects to a different location. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna tick this. Now, post-processing preset, right here, new, post-processing preset, there we go. Click plus, and numpad 6, we need to locate our camera so we'll know where the blackness takes place. First off, I put these to 0. As you see, the sky is gone now, so we need to mess around with these settings to get the sky back. This is alright. Remember, we don't have any shaders yet because we'll put them in. But as you see now, it's more balanced rather than full bright and full dark. This is enough for now. We'll go back to post-processing effect after we've done shading. Now, how do we add sun? Simple. Go to entity list. We can close the effects. Lights. This is where you do the shading. Distant light is basically sun because it's distant. So click on it, drag and drop here. Now it's gonna be annoying to position your sun by holding control. So what I like to do is click on Y button while it's selected. It will say tool view from world selection. What that means is you're piloting the light. If we press escape, we get to move around with the lights moving around together. So I want my sun to be here. To get out of this mode, you press console key again and you will be put back where you once was. Now where the hell is our distant light? If we go to numpad 9, press A while the sun is selected, or if it's not selected you can control F, or by this time you can press N and choose sun. Press A again to focus on it, go to entity and then click here, selection ranges, go back from the sun, go locate your terrain, and now you'll get the idea of what's affecting the sun, how the sun affects our world. Now we can't have infinite range like in post-processing effects, so we have to do this manually. What I like to do is put 2 zeros, go out of this world and see, yep, covers the whole thing. Now we know that it's covered. We can go back to numpad 6 and play with the color of the light. I like it like that. But the problem is now, the trees are dark. Why is that? Well, if we go Control F, terrain, okay. Distant light, none. It's not picking up our sun, so we have to do it manually. If we click select target from list on this side, choose sun, and there you go. Another problem. The shaders are quite dark. Well, because there's no probe light that bounces shaders from the cube background. So how do we do that? We go to entity list again, choose probe light, put it here, go to numpad 9 so we know where it is. We're gonna by holding control, move it up a bit, go to entity, size, selection ranges. Now why do we do that? These are quite extra steps. It's quite hard to memorize. Well, if you play this video over and over again, and if you practice and practice, you'll start to build this muscle memory. So if we go back, what I like to do in size, I put 2 zeros, and we'll see, and we want it to cover up the whole terrain. For basic purposes it's enough, but if you're doing something more complex you might need more probe lights. If we press numpad 6 and go to our shaders, they're still quite dark. Why is that? Well, because they're not baked in. And how do we do that? We go here, look at these. This is another toolbar that you can use to modify your world. First off, we need to choose bake. What I like to do is just click bake all, press escape again, and as you see, we have shaders. Right, so we have now proper shaders since it's a daytime. But the problem is, the trees are still quite dark. How do we fix that? That's because we added a probe light, but terrain hasn't picked it up yet. So we Control F, terrain, type in terrain if it's not typed in before, click OK, main probe. We choose this, probe light, done. And forest probe, just in case, probe light. Enable GUI baking. This is needed when we'll want to bake in high quality shaders and lighting, so we tick that. And now we got saying terrain, the forest probe currently should always be flagged as infinite. We click on this arrow and we'll look for infinite. Type regular, we need infinite. If you hover your mouse over here on this console, press middle mouse, Control, and then when we save it, we don't have that error anymore, which is great. So we got this world. Now, how do we make it look interesting? We got lights, we can even have collision. Now, if we wanted to put our character in here, we just simply hold Shift and T to enter the simulation mode from the viewport. And as you see here, we're in the world. There we are. We got a basic world. Now how did we make it interesting? Because it's just flat. If we go to our terrain editor again, there's a bunch of options such as elevation, vegetation, materials, roads, patches, navigation, light map, and walls. Well, I'm gonna start with elevation. In elevation, we have this sphere. If we use mouse wheel, we can control the transparency of it. Moving our mouse wheel. To paint the actual elevation, we can hold Control and then start going like this. And if we don't hold Control, we make the terrain rise. It's pretty basic, but it looks like something. Now if we hit Control again, we can kind of like smooth it out a bit, like so. And it's just a matter of just playing around with the elevation. Alright, so vegetation. Actually no, elevation. And if we press Q, we can change the options here. For example, if you click here, you can flatten, smooth, noise. What noise does? Noise is basically makes it like so. If we go back to sculpt, we can toy around again. By holding Control, we elevate it down. And that's pretty much it. You'll just have to play around with the settings that might find your interest and play around with them. Now, let's try to go to vegetation. What vegetation does is it adds vegetation. Just hold left mouse button and keep holding till it starts putting the trees, like so. This is pretty interesting. And if we go in, we see we have created a little forest. Materials should allow you to paint, but I don't think you're capable of painting on already created vegetation. Or it might be my bad. If you hold Control, no, nothing's happening. So I haven't figured out how you can change the texture of your forest, so you'll have to stick with what the biome gives you with. But if you wanted to paint dirt, for example, around here, hold left mouse button and here you have it. It's not very precise, but it does its job enough. And if we go back to vegetation, start putting trees here. See it like that. If you go back to materials, short grass with flowers, go here. By holding control, you should be able to paint. Yeah, hold control. No, nothing. What is painting? There we go. Hold shift. So the combination is shift, control, and left mouse. Either shift to paint more, control to put it out back, left mouse to bake in the dirt. And if you hold shift while on the dirt, you'll create this rocky ground. Grass and ground. Like so. You just choose whichever material you like that is provided in the biome and just paint it over like so. Since I told you it's not very precise, it's quite not easy to get the the effects you wanted. But you get the idea. Now, what does roads do? Roads, when you click roads, we pretty much don't have anything to choose from. Well, unless you press the insert key and do it again and again and again. And this is what it does. And if you double click on these markers, double click on it will select all the markers. And if we hold Control Shift and drag our mouse, we can resize it. Control Shift to scale it like so. Yeah, make sure you're holding Control Shift. And as you see here, we created a road. What patches do? Actually, there's one interesting thing. If, for example, you wanted a road on the hills, make sure you deselected your previous rows by pressing the console key. And if you press insert again, choose the end of your road marker. And if we hold control, double click on the location we want to put the marker in, and we can get some interesting effects like that. Again, you have to play around to get what you desire. For example, if you hold Control Shift again and then just drag it like so, we created like canyon kind of. Press console key to deselect. And if you go to patches, what patches do is makes your terrain rise with using markers. So if you press insert here, insert here, insert here, double click on the markers, hold control, and rise it. Pretty interesting. If you press insert here, insert here, insert here, double click, do it again, we get something like this. Navigation is where the AI will see where to go in your terrain. How do we add one? It's simple. Press insert, and this is where the navigation will be baked in. Hold Control Shift and then drag your mouse, or you can do it like so by holding Control Shift while doing so. And this is where the AI will be able to see and avoid obstacles. Well, by default, they don't avoid obstacles, they just charge straight at you. So if you put rocks, for example, they won't be able to go around them because they don't see the navigation, so they'll start going into the rocks. And how do we fix that? Well, once we have the navigation in, console key to deselect, go back to world editor like so, and now we don't don't see anything what we did with the navigation, which is fine. If you want to go back, double click on the terrain, navigation, it's there. Go back to World Editor. Now to bake in the navigation, well, let's just save first, we don't want to crash. Press B, and as you see by default it might be on visibility, so we don't need visibility yet. We go to navigation, press OK. Give it some time as it's rendering the navigation on your terrain. Alright, so the navigation is baked in. And now how do we check that navigation? Well, simply go to rendering, choose navigation, and here we are. We got our navigation. This is where the AI will see where to go. By default, they still will see the player, but if the player was next to that patch, the AI would just go here and probably will get stuck here because it won't be able to see its navigation. Now the AI will go around it if the player's around here. So navigation's done. We can put in some monsters if we wanted to, but that's on to the next tutorial. So if we press 6, we pretty much have our world. To make some changes, as you see here, actually there's hardly any shading. Oh, it's right here. It's just not very bright, or too dark, I should say. Too bright, yeah. To fix this, we can go to post-processing effect by pressing Ctrl F and then typing it in. Post-processing preset, we can play around with these settings. And for fun, we can adjust the gamma to make it darker if we wanted to. Then another solution is to play around with the sun. So we type in sun. Yeah, see what I mean? Like that. And as you see here, we got pretty much nice shaders. But as you see now, if we look down, there's too much light. So again, post-processing effect, play around with these settings. I'm gonna put it to 0 and then play around again. Put it to 1. Kinda like that. See what I mean? Play around with these settings and you'll get your desired results. As you see here, it's kinda quite problematic again. Alright, let's play around with the settings again. And go back to sun to adjust the brightness. Yeah, it might be post-processing effect that's causing this. So again, play around till you get your desired results. Now, it looks alright, but to make it more interesting, there's actually a problem because the sky might be too bright. So we go to Cube Background in Modulator, click here. There we go. Sky is properly visible. We got shaders. Can Control S to save it. Now, here's the next part of the tutorial. It looks pretty alright, but it's not enough. The game looks better actually. So, if you have a good computer, go F10 to enter the menu, Options, Performance. There we go. Which means the editor will now run on ultra graphics if your computer is capable enough. If not, you'll have to decrease the settings. Alright, so how do we make this more interesting? Well, go back to Terrain Editor, Light Map, Insert, make sure it's only one, and then make sure it covers the entire area of where you want the beauty to be in. Close that down, save the world, Control S, press B again. No, my bad. Alt G. There we go. And everything's fine here by default, so we just hit OK. There we go. Looks a lot more interesting. Control S to save it again. See that? This means it saved the light map, and now the level is beautiful enough. It's just how you would like to create it to make it even more beautiful. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna leave it as it is. And that's pretty much it. We've got all we need in our level. Another thing is you might not need to work with terrain as much. You might want to work with the models. So how do we add a model? Well, if you go to numpad 9, press insert key anywhere, make sure you're in the world editor, press insert, and this box will appear. If you look to the left, you'll see where it says model, stretch, and all other settings. In the model, click browse, and you type here whatever you want. For tutorial purposes, I'm just gonna type in rock. Just wait for it to load everything. Right. Now, again, F3 to look for the rock model we need. And this one, for example, is enough. Notepad 6 to see how it looks like in the world. It looks like something. Now, to make it maybe even more interesting, hold Control, put it there, Control Shift, and maybe scale it up a bit. So it kind of gives this epic scale, I should say. Hold to copy this model, hold Control C, then move your mouse where you want to copy it, Control V, and just go nuts, like so. Now, how do we give an effect that's so it's like in the distance? Well, you can add a fog if you wanted to. Go to Entity List, Effects, choose Fog, drag and drop it in here. Press numpad 9 to see where it actually is. There we are. You don't need to go to selection here, it's not important for the fog entity, but you can do that if you wanted to. For tutorial purposes, what I like to do is make sure it envelops the whole world, move it up a bit, and now you see, if you go to numpad 6, that it's too much. Depth density can fix that, like so. Now there's too much fog, max distance, maybe, no. Not enough. Can kind of like that, and we can move it by pressing Q, and we're kind of now distant. Again, it's not perfect, but for the tutorial we can make it simple. We can play around with the settings, give it a different color if you wanted to, like so. So these are basics of the engine. You can play around and get various effects if you wanted to, but for the time being, this is enough. We got our world, we got our fog. It looks okay. On to the next tutorial, I'll talk about and teach you how to script and make battles, events to happen in your world. For the time being now, take care.